Wanderers, you asked for it, and now we have it. Changes to tempering and masterworking are going to be hitting the Season 11 PTR. Now, we're going to break down exactly what is going to be changing, how you're going to be able to use this new system, and the extra layer that they're adding on top of this. So what is going to be happening? Tempering and masterworking have been refocused around their most core elements, customization and prestige. Players now always get their desired tempering affix, and masterworking has a direct path towards perfection. So before we even jump into tempering, we're going to talk about the way that gear is going to be changing in the new season. Currently, when you find any piece of gear on the ground, you're going to have 3 different affixes that are available to you. Now, this was a big change when we hit Loot Reborn because we used to have 4 affixes per piece of gear, and we could not actually add any more, which was the tempering. Once we got 2 temper recipes, we actually dropped from 4 down to 3. We are now going to be going back to 4 affixes that can drop on a piece of gear, which will add a little bit more RNG to the pieces of gear that you're going to be finding. However, if you do happen to find that perfect piece of gear, you will no longer have the option to brick it. Currently, what we get when we're tempering is we have a random chance that is going to add any of these specific ones, and some of them have upwards of 3 to 4, sometimes even 5 different options for you to pick from. So if I wanted to get my damage, which is not a great stat to get, but for this example we're going to use it, I didn't get it, so now I have to randomly re-roll what I want. Then I have only a limited number of chances, and I still have to get a second temper. So then if I don't get the one that I wanted again and I use up all my chances, now that really great piece of gear that I had is now gone. I can never make it better, and I can't use it anymore. Tempering is changing that. You will now be able to select the specific affix that you want to apply to your gear from the tempering recipes that you found. You will no longer have it randomly applied. That means that you can no longer brick your tempering. Now, what bricking means is that you put on something, you tried to apply an affix that you needed, you didn't get it in the limited number of tries that you got, and now the piece of gear is unusable, and you just salvage it, and you have to go and try and find something else. That will no longer happen with the new tempering system. Items can now only have 1 temper, so we're going from 2 down to 1, and then we're still going to have the same amount of affixes on it, so that's not going to be changing. Tempering charges can be restored indefinitely. So we'll have to see what we want, and I'm not sure if the tempering chances are going to be for changing affixes, because if you can specifically get the one that you want, I'm not sure what the changes are for, but we're going to find out once we hit the PTR, which is in 5 days from the time of recording this video. So you will now be able to just pick your temper. If I wanted chance for earthquakes to cast twice, boom, I got it. Done. I can move on with my day. I don't have to sit here and then hope that I get it in the 12 chances that I have to get it. So then we're going to be looking at masterworking. So masterworking is a pretty big pain point in the way that it works in the season for a lot of people. You can only masterwork after you've put 2 tempers on. You have 12 ranks. Now that seems very simple. You put your 2 tempers on here like I did. I put my gear in here, and then I'm just going to rank it up, and I can just rank it up to 12. Now, that is only the very beginning and basics of masterworking. Now, if you want a full guide on masterworking, it'll be in the description of this video, because it gets very specific, especially if you want to increase your power. Specific masterworking is the biggest increase to damage in the game in the current season. Now, we don't know what that's going to feel like in the next season. I have a feeling it's still going to be, but there is going to be another layer on top of masterworking next season. Specific masterworking means that you're taking the rolls and your affixes here from blue, getting it to yellow, and then getting it to orange. Now, it is a very random chance. It is about 25 times on average to get yourself a yellow, because that means you have to constantly reset your masterworking and then redo your ranks all the way from level 1 every single time, and have a random 1 in 5 chance for it to land on the same exact skill. Then it turns into about 125 chances on average to get it into the orange, which is getting it to land all 3 times at 4, 8, and 12 of your ranks on the same stat. And that is very, very difficult to do, and it takes a lot of time, and people are very unhappy with just standing around. And it's 5 million gold every single time that you reset, and you can do the math. 5 million times 125 times, that's a lot of dough. What is going to be changing right now is that Masterworking will no longer increase the item's affix value. That means that when we come over here and we go to Masterwork something, you see that we get 5% increase to all of our affixes, every single one on the gear, which is why this is so strong. It's not going to do that anymore. What it's going to do is that it's going to increase the quality, which is going to give a bonus to the base damage, armor, or resistance of an item. So we look at the item here, the weapon damage is going to be 325 at your max. This is going to increase your weapon damage by 20%. So we're going to get an additional 65 added on to the top end of our damage. Now, that actually does seem like a pretty significant increase to how much damage we're going to be doing, but it will be at our base level of our damage, not on the affix level of their damage. So we will now have 20 ranks instead of your traditional 12. And then if you were to increase the quality of your armor, we will now gain additional armor. So we will take 160 and we'll get 32 extra armor instead of increasing all of the other affixes. So on the grand scale of things, it does feel like this changes to Masterworking is going to reduce the amount of damage that we're going to be doing, the amount of life that we'll have, and all of the other affixes that are going to come along with it. Now, they did put a lot of work into combat this season as well, which all of the monsters have been looked at. So the life scaling of the monsters will be proportional to how much damage we're doing. But we'll have to see what the difficulty feels like when we get into the game. Now, if you were to masterwork on the new system, any of the jewelry, you will gain increase to your resistances. And with the changes that they're going to be making to the way that your defenses work, resistances and armor will not cap out anymore. You will now continuously gain damage reduction from all sources with armor. So these changes will make your character a little bit stronger. So now we've gotten ourselves to 20 by increasing our ranks, and each rank we're going to gain either 2 or 5 levels of quality. Once you're at your maximum quality, that's when you're going to get your capstone bonus. Now the capstone upgrades a random non-greater affix on your piece of gear to a greater affix. Now that is very specific to a non-greater affix piece. So if you find a 3GA piece of gear, you will have a 1 in 2 chance to max out that piece of gear and get 4 GAs instead of 3. Now, why does it 1 in 2? Because you can actually now put a greater affix onto your tempers, which could be huge. You get a 50% increase over what your normal temper would have been or your normal affix would have been by making it a greater affix. So you choose the affix that you want. Let's say that it's going to be your chance to cast Earthquakes twice. If this was a greater affix, I would have almost 100% chance to cast Earthquakes twice simply by masterworking and putting that capstone onto this specific affix. Now, what happens if you roll the affix that you do not want on your piece of gear and you convert that to a greater affix? The great news is you can re-roll, and that's where your re-roll costs are going to come in. You can now re-roll the greater affix that it hit. You can change the greater affix to whatever one was already not a greater affix. This is going to lead to having higher quality gear with more greater affixes, less time spent masterworking, and you will have to spend Obdicite, like normal, to re-roll. Re-rolling the current Masterworked affix will cost Obdicite, and they're bringing back an old friend for anybody that has not been here that long. Neath Iron used to be used in the very first iteration of Masterworking. You used to have 3 different types of Masterworking in order to progress up the tiers. Now that's just going to be using Obdicite and Neath Iron, and we'll be able to re-roll that specific affix and get a greater affix on the one that we want. Now, that is all amazing. Great changes that are going to be coming, a lot more deterministic in the way that we're going to be seeing things, and no bricking on top of that. Kind of, sort of. We're going to be adding in Reach Untold Heights with Sanctification. Sanctification is going to be your new end game goal for gear. Now, this technically will not brick your piece of gear in the essence that it will not be unusable, but you will have a chance to randomly roll some really, really crazy new affixes or aspects. Yes, aspects. And you also have a chance to get some that just might not be so good. Once you have done your sanctification, you can no longer adjust the item. You cannot masterwork it. You cannot temper it. You can only replace the socket, and you cannot re-sanctify it. What sanctification is going to do Sanctification is your opportunity to take the ascendant power of the angels and imbue that into your items. Now, Hadriel is making a comeback from Diablo 2. We have our first interactive angel in the game, which is super exciting. We lost Anarius, we got Hadriel. Where's Tyrael? What you're going to do is you're going to have the chance to roll for a single chance to get, and this is actually real, apply a bonus legendary power. Can you imagine having 2 legendary powers on your piece of gear? Now, I don't know how we're going to choose the power, or if there is a set of lists that will have that bonus legendary power. We'll have to find that out once it goes live. You can improve an affix into a greater affix, which is great. If you've gotten your 3 GA gear, you masterworked it to 4, and you now have 4 GA piece of gear, you can have a 5 GA piece of gear simply by sanctifying your item and getting an improved greater affix on that one that you do not have yet. You can also add a bonus affix from a pool of special sanctification affixes. So you have your 3 GA piece of gear, now you rolled it at the Masterworker, you have 4 GA gear, and with this, it seems like you will now have 6 different affixes on a single piece of gear, which seems pretty crazy. Imagine running around with a whole bunch of 6 affix gear on. Replace an existing affix with a random sanctification affix. Now, I don't know what those sanctification affixes are going to be, but this could take one of the affixes that you have on and change it into something else. And this is the one that I mentioned that might not be so good. Make your items indestructible, preventing it from losing durability. Now, there always has to be that one in order to keep the chase going, and in order to have those really special moments where you do find the one chance to get that really great piece of gear and you get it. Now, this one is that one. We really don't need indestructible items. I don't know what it's going to feel like in the new season, but we'll see what happens. This is a great chance for you to provide feedback on this right here. Like I mentioned, sanctifying your items make it unmodifiable, ending the item's journey. This should be the last upgrade you make to your item. So if you have the perfect piece of gear, you've got the tempers right, you've got the GAs right, and you go to do your sanctification, this is the last step. If you don't get the one you want, it is still a great piece of gear. It just won't have the sanctification that you want on it, maybe. It still could have some really great stats, and it is still usable. That's a really big difference between having the temper that you absolutely needed to get and you didn't get, and now you have to salvage the gear, to this here where maybe you didn't get your additional legendary bonus, but you got a 6th affix on that piece of gear, still making it really, really good and better than your normal item. So there are a couple different ways to get the celestial improvements here. You can actually start getting stuff in pre-torment tiers. In pre-torment difficulties, after defeating a lesser evil within one of the game modes, they've taken over, such as Helltides will be the pits, which you can't do pre-torment, or the Undercity, which you can do pre-torment. You'll have the chance, and it's a rare chance, to sanctify an item at the Heavenly Anvil. If you choose not to use this at the time of invitation, you will not have the option to sanctify your item again until you receive another divine invitation. And what that means is during the leveling process, you have a chance to sanctify an item. It can be any of the items that you have on, but you only have that moment to sanctify that item. That changes in the torment tiers when you hit to your endgame content, but during the leveling process, if you run into one of these moments, that could greatly improve your leveling process during that. So this is something that no matter what you're wearing at the time, if you see that anvil, make sure you pop in your item and then you hit that sanctification. Once you have obtained heavenly sigils, which can be used at will to transport you to the heavenly forge to undergo sanctification. These are only needed to sanctify items at ancestral quality. These can only be earned in torment difficulties. So that's how you're going to get everything sanctified to what you want, and it'll take you right there. So that is all of the big changes for masterworking and tempering. That is all I got for you today. Hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, make sure you share it with your friends. Thank you everybody for watching. I'm live every night. I'd love it if you stopped by, said hi, theorycrafted with me. Catch you on the clip side.